Thanks for joining us here today on Worldview with Mike Lester. Each episode, we have a conversation with ministry leaders or other committed Christians with one simple goal in mind: to learn how to develop a biblical worldview. That way we can be faithful believers at the intersection of theology and life. I invite you to stay connected with us at jmichaellester.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you find today's episode helpful, please consider sharing it with your friends or even giving us a review. We believe it's important for everyone to know how to have a biblical worldview and to live life correctly where theology and life intersect. And so with that in mind, let's dive into today's topic. Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of Worldview with Mike Lester. I'm really excited about today's guest and today's topic. I'm in studio today with Tobi England, a friend of mine for nearly 2 decades. And Tobi has been the Chief Academic Officer at West Coast Baptist College. He's also worked with their institutional effectiveness. And really what he also has done as far as teaching deals with our conversation today. He has really developed the apologetics concentration at West Coast Baptist College, trained a lot of guys to think apologetically, biblically, logically. And of course, we've had a lot of conversations where iron sharpening iron. So today we are actually going to talk about apologetics. So Tobi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Man, really glad to be here. I just love how you tie that together, thinking logically, thinking biblically, and thinking apologetically, because I really think that those are the same things. Like, these are different facets of what I know you're focused on worldview in your podcast. Those are different aspects of the same thing.
Yeah. So today, a lot of times when guys think about apologetics, they think about, a guy learning how to, be a debater or whatever.
Sure.
And they think maybe this is in the realm of the professional ministry guy. But today's topic is a little different. I want to talk today about apologetics from a parenting perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So important.
Before we talk about that, here's what I've learned. We really need to define terms. So I want you to take a moment and maybe give me a layman's definition of apologetics.
So I think a lot of people, when they hear apologetics the first time, they're not even sure what it is. And it sounds like learning how to say I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah. I apologize.
So while that's a valuable skill, a valuable life skill, you're not going to learn it as you study apologetics as a discipline. So really, Christian apologetics, of course, what we're talking about here is the defense of the Christian faith.
Okay.
So I root it in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, where we're told to be ready to give an answer to every man that asketh us a reason of the hope that is within us. So I tell people, for a Christian, you need apologetics for yourself, because you can't give someone something you don't have. Like, if you ask me right now for a pen, I don't have a pen on me. I can't give you a pen. I need to have one before I can give one.
Okay.
So 1 Peter 3:15 tells us you need to be able to give an answer. You need to be able to give a reason for what you believe. And Mike, that means that you've got to have a reason.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. When you say it's a defense of the Christian faith, that sounds really, really broad.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean like you're covering every single topic imaginable? Or is it specifically geared toward what would be considered fundamental to the faith? What does it entail?
Yeah, so I think you can be an apologist for a variety of things, right? So I am an apologist for good coffee. In that sense, like, I'll defend it and I'll give you reasons for it, why it's better, why it beats instant coffee. So when we're talking about apologetics in a Christian sense, you can be an apologist for this or an apologist for that, like you're advocating for it.
Okay.
So what I'm using it essentially is I'm focusing on the fundamentals. And by fundamentals, we mean, at the center core, foundational, the gospel issues, the
deity of Christ.
Absolutely. The
resurrection.
Things so you can disagree with me on my stance on tongues. I'm a cessationalist. You can disagree with me on eschatology. I'm a dispensationalist. But there are people that disagree with me and they're going to go to heaven, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But if you hold the opposite view that I hold on the resurrection of Jesus, you're not going to also be a Christian. That's a fundamental issue.
That's good.
So apologetics can be very broad, but I think where you start is at that foundational level.
Okay. Where'd your passion come from?
I do have a passion for
Yeah, I
it.
know you do.
And
That's why I've got you on the show.
my passion for it, honestly, Mike, is deeply personal. My dad was an atheist who got saved as an adult, went to Bible college, met my mom, went into ministry, and all that was before I was born. By the time I came along, I was the pastor's kid of the previous atheist. But I grew up in a home that was rich in Bible and doctrine, and my dad was a good theologian, and
Didn't he teach you Greek in high school?
I learned Greek in high school.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of that. Very great environment in that sense to grow up in, and yet I remember, Mike, where I was, what I was reading, and the couch I was sitting on when it really it felt like all of a sudden it was crumbling. And there was a lot of things that built up to it. I was 16 years old. I was reading a book by Philip Johnson on evolution. And all of a sudden I began asking myself questions like, Toby, what if it's not true?
Okay.
What if the other guys that are really smart are right, that disagree with you? What's the chance that another worldview is actually a better worldview? And as soon as I began to wonder that, Mike, I then began to wonder, am I really saved? Am I allowed to be a Christian and wrestle with doubt? I think in a single word, I'd answer your question: doubt. So
that was the genesis for the passion.
It drove me.
Yeah.
It drove me because I initially tried to ignore it. I initially tried to pretend it wasn't significant, and I was very unsuccessful on a personal level. I felt like the only way to stop my doubt was to stop thinking. So
Which is not a good response either.
You know what? There were moments where I was willing to try that, and it didn't work. I couldn't shut it down. It was like this machine was going out of control, and I just couldn't pull the plug on it. And what I realized, thankfully, because of this journey that I feel like I was forced to take into looking for the rational basis for a Christian worldview. And of course, I found that God left the breadcrumbs there for us to follow. But what I found is that the strongest faith is not when we run away from our doubt. For me, the strongest faith has always been on the other side of that doubt. So yeah, it really was something that I feel, people say, I didn't choose this, it chose me. And there's a little bit of a sense where that's true, because it was my personal doubt that drove me to look for these answers.
So how long have you been teaching apologetics?
It's been over a decade now, probably going on a decade and a half.
And the Lord has opened up some opportunities for you to have like seminars, apologetics.
I've been able to speak in different places. I've written a little bit. I have a passion for helping people in this area. And well-known apologist, Alistair McGrath, said that apologetics is to make thinkers Christians and Christians thinkers. And I've been blessed to be on both sides of that.
Yeah,
I'm passionate about evangelism, but I'm also passionate about helping Christians think about their faith.
And evangelism and apologetics aren't enemies.
Oh my goodness. You cannot do evangelism in a secular context without doing apologetics.
Yeah. So there's so many different things. My mind is racing things we could cover. We could cover apologetic methods. We could there's just so many different things. But I really want to focus in on apologetics from the standpoint of a parent raising their child in today's environment, when the biblical worldview has been so attacked and so maligned and so eroded. So the apologetics in the home somehow has to connect with a biblical worldview, right?
Yes, it really does.
So talk to me a little bit, if you will, about the importance of apologetics in the home, and how does a parent even get equipped? I mean, like, I can imagine somebody listening right now who didn't go to Bible college, who's never sat in your class. Man, there's no way I could do that. And I think the truth would be they probably already are doing a little bit of it and just don't know that it's part of it.
Right. So I think that being a parent just elevates so many areas of life. For me, it has. I know for you, you're a passionate parent and have a lovely family. And as a parent, when it comes to the area of apologetics, I mean, my goal is to protect, to provide, to guide my children.
Man, you were on a alliterated Baptist sermon there, and then you dropped
unintentional.
You dropped it on.
And that goes to their faith as well. So there's this balance I think that all of us have. You don't want your child to be inundated with filth or with wrong views. On the other hand, you eventually want them to be able to think on their own and process things through a biblical worldview, right? I tell people my goal isn't to raise good children. My goal is to raise good adults. And
Yeah.
by good, we mean productive and profitable and having positive relationships and disciples, right, of Christ and doing kingdom work, following their God-given calling and whatever that is, raising their own families. So you look at the end game, you look down the road, like what do they need? What tools are they going to need? When they're 7, you're asking that about, what are they going to need in junior high? And when they're in junior high, what are they going to need in high school and then in college and then as adults? So I think that we need to be planting seeds now that will bear fruit in their life decades down the road.
Okay, so I'm going to push back away. This sounds really, really good, but really, really philosophical. So, practically speaking, you have 4 children at home,
I have 4
and
kids.
they're all different ages.
Mhm.
So you're not handling them all the same
2
way.
junior high, 2 elementary right now.
So talk to me just practically for a minute. How does Dr. Tobi England, the apologist, how does that translate to Toby, the parent?
Sure, sure. So I think fundamentally it starts by having an incredible, intentional and uncomfortable sometimes openness to questions. So
Stop there for a minute and tell me what you mean by that. Like, what kind of questions are our kids asking in 21st century American Christianity? So
yeah,
what are kind of things that they're having to deal with that we didn't have to deal with at their age?
sure. Well, I think part of that may be determined by the type of media that you allow your children to be exposed to. And to some extent, I think a parent needs to influence that.
Mhm.
So, our kids don't have social media, and there's both neurological and spiritual reasons for that. If you do, I think it's fine, but you want to be intentional. Let's say
Mhm.
be intentional about it. But even at that, my kids have questions. I mean, I've got 2 of them now going through puberty. They've got questions related to that
Mhm. Mhm.
and all that that entails. As within the last week, I had my 7th grader come down after bedtime, say, "Hey, I've got a question I've been thinking about. I've heard this word with my friends. They kind of joke about this. I feel like maybe it's not a good thing, but I'm not sure what they mean. Dad, what's this?"
And they feel comfortable to ask it.
You know what? There's nowhere else I want them to go to get those answers. I don't
Sure.
want them to Google it. I don't
Yeah.
want them going to their friends. So I think he knows that I'm going to be honest with him. I'm going to listen to him, and I'm going to give my best answer. And if I need to look something up, I will.
So this isn't necessarily then taking them through catechisms or whatever.
It's not. I mean, it could be. There are curriculums out there. I try to have a conversation on Saturday mornings where I talk about something with my kids after we have pancakes. I try to have some intentionality, but I think in a real practical aspect with your kids, knowing and telling them that they can come to you with questions. Because if we're not careful, they'll feel comfortable asking the small questions, but not the big ones. And just because a young person isn't asking the big questions doesn't mean they don't have the big questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that festers. And I get to see the other side of that, working with young adults and teaching on a secondary level or a higher ed level. I'll have people come to me and say, "Toby, I'm pastor's kid, deacon's kid, or grew up in church, and you address some things today that I have had deep in my heart. I haven't even addressed them with anyone." I I've had people say, "I didn't think I was going to come back to church or to Bible college or to, I thought my days as a Christian were down to months because I just couldn't get over these apologetic issues." And then you just went there. You just ripped the Band-Aid off. You just started talking about them. And I didn't think anybody talked about
Sure.
these things
Yeah.
like, is the Bible reliable and God's existence and these things. And our kids are going to have that. I- You know this because your kids are a stage ahead of mine in a lot of cases. The thoughts they think are big thoughts in little minds, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can see the questions that they're asking and the conclusions they reach in early years impacting them throughout their high school and beyond. And when it comes to apologetics, we've got to recognize that small changes early and influences at a young age are just incredibly powerful because they're going to be magnified over the years. And just knowing them makes me want to be a part of that conversation with my kids. Just instead of being leaning out, I want to lean in. I want to be there for them.
Okay, so West Coast sponsors a Joshua camp. That's what's going on this week while we're meeting. And so there's a worldview camp. My daughter is attending that. And then there's also, is it an apologetics camp or is it apologetics?
That's rolled in. That's
Okay,
part
okay.
of the worldview.
So you've got, is it predominantly 9th through 12th grade or is it 7th grade?
It is.
Okay.
Some 7th graders
Okay.
all the way up
So
through.
junior high to high school.
Mm-hmm.
So you have junior high and high school that are here to, they're attracted somehow to worldview issues.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's incorporated into that is this need for apologetics.
Right.
So if you only had time to have 4 or 5 conversations with a teenager in 1 week, what kind of topics are you hitting with them?
So that is, like you said, this week. Earlier today, I was speaking to 100 young people, and my first session was existence of God. I think if
and can a parent who has no Bible training, college-wise, they can talk to the kids about the existence of God?
Absolutely.
So what would you say? And again, there's so many other areas that you can go to as far as proving the existence of God, but
Sure.
just for the person who's just sitting in a church and just wanting to raise their family to love God, how would they approach the subject of this is how we know God exists?
Sure. So let me answer that in 2 parts. Number one, of course, we want a biblical worldview, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a Christian, we're rooted in Scripture. But it's interesting to note that Scripture tells us that you don't need a Bible to know that God exists. Check out Romans chapter 1 and verse number 20.
Yeah.
And,
or the heavens declare the handiwork.
Absolutely, yeah. Psalm 19. So the Bible tells me I don't need a Bible to know that God exists. That doesn't mean I don't need a Bible, right? I need it for understanding theology and the gospel.
Anybody who lived before Moses knew God existed.
And God tells us that. God tells us we know that through nature. So then the second part of my answer is, okay, so where do we go to grab that? Because sometimes we're talking to somebody that doesn't accept the Bible as authoritative. And we may still use it. I do, but in addition to that, we want to be able to show them these arguments. So one argument I would give would be for an argument from design. When we look at the design in life.
Okay, so let's break this down to, I'm a parent and I'm talking with my junior aged kid.
Mm-hmm.
When they're in 3rd or 4th grade.
Okay.
Maybe we're just going through a hike through the forest.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of opportunities do I have to show the existence of God from nature?
Yeah, so I think you can look at something like the design in a leaf with the little veins. I think you can look at get a good pair of binoculars or telescope and look at a galaxy, and you see the Fibonacci sequence, and you see all of these different aspects of design. Just understanding the complexity of life. You're out on a hike, you see a squirrel, you're looking at a plant. Here's what we know. The RNA and the DNA necessary for life is information. It's like a language. And what we know is that information only comes from intelligence. It doesn't self-produce.
Sure, that's good. That's good.
So just showing them that. I think it could be as simple as taking a box, a $15 little Lego set, and opening it up and putting it together and just asking them, okay, if we took this all apart, put the pieces in a small cardboard box and taped it, but large enough for the item. If we toss that around and threw it around, how long would we have to do that for this to self-assemble? Yeah. And they're going to know it's never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So you just look and you see this design.
And this is a lot different than you sitting in a pulpit and teaching a class. This is now life one-on-one opportunities God presents, and they're formative.
They really
moments.
are.
Yeah.
They'll never forget it.
Yeah.
And then just the existence of the universe. I'm a young Earth creationist, but there's guys out there that are old Earth creationists, and there's naturalists out there that say they're a Big Bang theorist. Here's the thing: in all of those worldviews, you've got a point where the world begins to exist. So here's how William Lane Craig will give it in the Kalam argument. Number one premise: everything that begins to exist has a cause. Number two, the universe began to exist. Number three, the universe has a cause. And it has to follow.
Yeah. So give me an example of something else besides the existence of God that you would teach your junior age kid or your junior high kid.
So I think if we're scaffolding up from a Christian worldview, you have to talk about truth a lot. You point out that Truth is truth. You don't get to make it up.
So let's talk about that in the world that we live in.
It's very
What-
relevant.
yeah.
Yeah, people are denying truth sometimes.
Or they'll say things like, that's my truth.
My truth, yeah. My truth.
Yeah.
That's like saying this is my gravity.
Yeah.
It's your gravity.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So,
gravity is just a universal thing. Like if it's true, it's true. If it's not true, right?
and we have a responsibility as parents to help our kids have a worldview that understands what truth is and
Yes.
it doesn't change.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And then the existence of God. I would say the resurrection is incredibly important
Where does
because
Scripture fit in? Reliability of Scripture.
and I was going to go to there
Okay,
next.
okay.
So this is where I talk about the truth and the existence of God. Then I talk about the resurrection. Then I talk about the reliability of Scripture. So I think those are three incredibly important legs on this table.
So let's say if a parent made a decision today, like I want to have some intentional conversations with my kids while they're in the house, and I'm going to make sure they understand that truth is absolute, and truth is from God and the source of truth. All these things they're going to talk about truth, and then they're also going to say, I'm also going to talk about the existence of God and the resurrection and the reliability of Scripture. So if that's all they did,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of difference are we talking about as far as those young kids growing up to have a worldview that's more biblically oriented?
Well, I think that really is the core of the gospel. Those issues, and those can be the anchor. I'm afraid sometimes that in good Christian homes, if we're not careful, we want to influence our children, right? That's what we're talking about, how to do this well. If we're not careful, we'll fail to help them see the difference between central issues in our worldview and peripheral issues in our worldview. So we'll teach them everything from the existence of God, the virgin birth, reliability of Scripture and gospel, and then we'll teach them, our preference on music and entertainment,
Sure. Yeah,
and
yeah.
then our political view of the Second Amendment. And it's this whole package and
Yeah,
everything in between.
It's equal. It's all equal.
And that's where we have to be careful. It's not all equal.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: if two people agree on everything, only one of them's thinking, right?
Yeah, we've had that conversation a few times. Yeah.
And your kids are probably not going to be exact carbon copies of you. So you've got to determine what is the central part of their worldview that you want to speak into.
It's non-negotiable.
And here's what I love. I love this. The things that are the most central to our worldview, we can have the most confidence in through the apologetic method.
That's good. Here, I want to recap a little bit for a moment, just so I don't lose our hearers. You can be overwhelmed when you start looking at apologetics textbooks, and you can see pages that run, 300 or 400 pages a book, 500 pages a book, and you say, "Man, I just can't do that." What Toby is advocating for us, all of us, myself included, is, if there was only 3 areas we focused intentionally with our kids: truth and the existence of God, the resurrection, and the reliability of Scriptures. If we inculcated just those 3 principles in our life, then they have the tools for the rest of their adult years to continually to improve their biblical outlook, biblical worldview. And of course, all of this
Absolutely.
is said in the context of encouraging them to read their Bible on their own as well.
I was just going to say, in the context of 2 key relationships, you want it to push them to develop their personal relationship with the Lord. And then don't forget, you want to have that relationship with them as well.
Yeah, those are important caveats.
You want to live out Christianity before them. You're not going to be perfect, but have authenticity, and then be their parent and be a part of their life and develop that relationship. And that's one of the most critical things that you can do for your children to have a good worldview.
So we've talked about defining apologetics. We've talked about why it's important. We've talked about why it's important in the formative years. We've given some examples in 3 key areas. Is there anything else you would add to this conversation? I know we could talk about apologetics for hours, but
Sure.
but just in the context of apologetics from a parent's perspective, practical tips, maybe resources, or maybe something that we should have included and we haven't. Anything
Sure.
else?
Well, I would just say that you don't want to be afraid that you won't know the answer. Just accept that you won't know the answer. I mean, I've got graduate degrees in this, and you and I would both say in theology or apologetics or these areas, we don't have all the answers, right? We're still learning. We're still on a
Sure.
journey. We're still developing into the people God called us to be. So don't let that deter you. the other thing I'd really like to say is that, not to be too heavy on this, but I feel this as a parent. I just want to own this. At the end of the day, according to, I think, Deuteronomy 6 and passages like that, it really is the parent's responsibility. Churches need to be doing this, but it's not the church's responsibility. And Christian schools need to be doing this, and colleges need to be doing this, and youth departments need to be doing this. But at the end of the day, it's the fathers and it's the parents that bear the God-given responsibility for teaching and developing their children in spiritual matters, and I would say beyond spiritual matters as well. But just recognize, as a parent, this is your role. And it's okay to bring in other people. There's maybe podcasts like this you can listen to. There's directions you can send your kids. I bought my kids book by J. Warner Wallace, for kids, Cold Case
Cool
Christianity
case.
for Kids, and I had them read it. He's a
I
good
had my kids
author.
read Tactics.
Tactics is a
Yeah.
fantastic book. Most things that Lee Strobel put out, I would say watch for anything from maybe we'll someday get something out there in this space.
Fingers crossed.
But there's a lot of resources that already exist that are out there that you can give to your kids. You don't have to feel like, oh, it's my responsibility, I've got to go study 100 hours and have a conversation. You should have the conversation. You don't need to study 100 hours. And then maybe read through a book together. Read a chapter, they read a chapter, have a conversation about it. Some of these authors we mentioned, there's tools out there that are available. I mean, the fact that you've got your kids in a camp this week that focuses on that, there's a lot of resources provided. And just realizing how significant this is and what a joy it can be to be a part of developing
So
your kids
a
here.
lot of my listeners are outside of California. So just in case, I just threw out the word Joshua Camp, so they may not know even what they may not have context. So can you give just a quick, maybe just high-end overview of what Joshua Camp is accomplishing?
Joshua Camp is a camp that is done here in Lancaster that focuses on different aspects. So kind of the theme of it is discover your God and develop your gifts.
Okay.
So we've got people at Joshua Camps that are building robots and learning how to edit video and practicing serving volleyball and everything from sports.
Doing concrete.
Yeah. There's a practical skills
Mhm.
camp for the first time this year. We've got focuses on missions, but they all come together, and it's a camp environment. You've got different teams, competition and fun and main services, but it's kind of a skills focused camp in a spiritual setting. So it's really something that a lot of people benefited from.
And there's a good attendance. Yeah.
There is, yeah. We've got a real strong attendance this year. Dr. Schiller's been leading that, doing a great job.
Yeah.
So
And just as a parent, and my kids have always enjoyed that. So if you're looking for a camp for worldview issues, yeah, it's something you got to at least look at.
it's a big help.
Yeah.
It really is.
Toby, I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm trying to make sure we've crossed all of the boxes. I try to keep these conversations to about 30 minutes or most so people can digest it. But I think we have given people tools as a parent, and not just a parent. I mean, the things we talked about today can also apply to a youth pastor, those
Without a
kind of things
doubt.
as well. But I think if I had to take a takeaway, if I'm a parent listening today, it's like, you know what, I can do this. I can instill in my children the knowledge of truth
Mhm.
that's absolute and that it reflects the existence of God. And I can talk about that. I don't know all of the maybe uh, you know technical terms to get
Sure.
into, but I can talk about the fact from nature, from design, just cause and effect. I can show that all of this comes from a great designer.
Mhm.
I believe that dealing with the importance of the resurrection, because we didn't mention the chapter, but Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says, "There's no resurrection.
Christianity's not true.
It's all vain, and I'm of all men most miserable."
Right.
Yeah. So and again, 1 Corinthians 15 is a chapter maybe to walk through with your teens.
Yes. And not only does he say that the resurrection is essential for Christianity, he also gives arguments for the resurrection and eyewitnesses account. He
Yeah.
does apologetics right there in
in
1
that.
Corinthians
Yeah,
15.
yeah, that's a good point. And then the last part will be the reliability of scriptures. If we can't trust the Bible, then it comes back to our first point. We have no source of truth either.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, helpful.
So often we're teaching our young people what to believe. And I'm not saying don't do that.
There's a place for that.
But I'm also saying, hey, let's go a step farther
And
let's
why.
teach them why to believe.
Yeah.
And that's a joy to do as a parent.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Toby, if somebody had questions on this or wanted to reach out for maybe other resources, and they just wanted, and something you said they piqued their interest, is there a way they could find you? Like,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. I would love to have a conversation with somebody. If there's anything I can ever do to help, I would just say I'm easy to find online. My email's Toby with an I, Tobi.England at wcbc.edu. But you just jump on Twitter, Facebook, or
good.
Google it. I'd love to interact if there's anything I can do to be a help. And if you've got somebody that you're worried about and you're like, man, I wish I had these conversations 10 years ago. Now I'm scared. I'm a parent. I'm dragging them to church, but I'm scared. It's never too late.
Good. Yeah.
So you as a parent need to be there, lean in, just step up. And if there's anything I could do to be a help, boy, I'd love to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think today you've heard the heart behind the apologist, Toby England from West Coast